Welcome back to the Farmyard Care family. Take a slow breath and imagine that fresh country morning air, the kind that settles over a quiet barnyard before the day's work begins. Today we're taking a very hands-on journey, one that reaches far beyond the farm fence and connects us to thousands of years of human skill, patience, and practical wisdom. Have you ever watched a sheep grazing in the field or seen an alpaca moving gently across the pasture and wondered how that muddy, tangled, weather-worn coat becomes the soft, warm yarn we later wear as sweaters, scarves, and blankets? In a world where so many things are made quickly, bought quickly, and forgotten quickly, it's worth slowing down and remembering where our materials truly come from. Before wool becomes something beautiful, it begins as something raw, messy, and full of life. So today, we're going to slow our pace. We're going to handle the fiber, respect the animal it came from, clean away the dirt, and learn how rough fleece can become something useful, warm, and lasting. Together, we'll follow the full process of raw wool preparation, from the moment the fleece comes off the animal to the final skein of neatly spun yarn. Along the way, we'll look at the important differences between sheep's wool and alpaca fleece, because each one must be treated with care in its own way. And as we work through each step, we may also find a few quiet lessons from the farm about patience, transformation, and the value of doing things properly. So settle in, keep your hands ready, and let's turn raw fiber into something truly special. This is raw wool processing start to finish. Section 1, the harvest and the differences, sheep versus alpaca. Before we ever wash, card, or spin a single handful of fiber, we need to understand the animal that provided it. In my years working around farm animals and sharing practical homestead knowledge, I've learned that good processing always begins with respect for the source. In fiber work, we are mainly dealing with two very different materials. Ovine wool from sheep, known scientifically as Ovis aries, and camelid fiber from alpacas, known as Vicugna pacos. Sheep's wool is known for its springy, three-dimensional crimp, those natural waves that help the fiber hold air, stretch, and bounce back. It also contains a high amount of lanolin, a natural wax produced by the sheep's skin glands. Lanolin helps protect the animal from rain, wind, and harsh weather. That is why raw sheep fleece often feels soft, rich, and greasy in your hands. Alpaca fleece is different. Technically, it is classified as hair, even though many people still call the soft undercoat wool. Most alpacas are single-coated animals, and the major difference is this. Alpacas do not produce lanolin. Their fleece feels much drier than sheep's wool. But because alpacas love dust bathing to regulate body temperature and discourage insects, their raw fleece often carries plenty of sand, dirt, and fine grit. There are two main alpaca types. Huacaya alpacas make up most of the population, around 90%, and they have that fluffy teddy bear look with a soft, wavy crimp. Sri alpacas grow long, silky, straight locks that hang in beautiful ringlets, often called roping. With both sheep and alpacas, fineness is measured in microns. 1 micron is 1/25, zeros of an inch, and the lower the micron count, the softer that fiber usually feels against the skin. These differences are not just interesting facts. They decide how we clean, handle, and spin the fiber. Treat alpaca fleece the same way you treat greasy sheep wool, and you can quickly create problems. The animal teaches us the method before the work even begins. Section 2. The art of skirting. Sorting the good from the bad, the first real hands-on step is called skirting, and this is where the clean, beautiful dream meets the honest reality of farm life. A fresh fleece is not a polished product. It comes straight from an animal that has spent the year walking, grazing, resting, rolling, and living outdoors. So we lay the raw fleece out on a mesh skirting table, allowing loose dirt, sand, and small debris to fall away as we begin sorting. Every fleece tells the story of that animal's year. It carries sunshine and pasture, but it also carries burrs, twigs, hay, seeds, and, of course, manure. In fiber work, much of this plant and barnyard debris is called vegetable matter, or VM. Skirting is the process of removing the lower quality, heavily contaminated parts so we can protect the best section of the fleece, often called the blanket. We work carefully around the edges first. The dirty tags from the tail area need to go. The short, coarse belly wool and armpit fibers should be removed. Any stiff guard hairs must be pulled out as well. Another thing we must watch for is second cuts. These are short little pieces made when the shearer passes over the same area twice. They may look harmless at first, but if they stay in the fleece, they can become tiny knots called neps in the finished yarn. This step takes patience, but it is one of the most important parts of the whole process. On the farm, you learn quickly that not everything can be saved and not everything should be carried forward. Skirting teaches that lesson clearly. By removing what is dirty, weak, too short, or unhelpful, we give the best fiber a chance to become something valuable. It is not wasteful. It is refinement. Section 3. The Great Wash, scouring the fleece without disaster. Now we come to one of the most critical stages, scouring or washing the fleece. This is the point where good fiber preparation can succeed beautifully, or go badly wrong and turn into a felted mess. Washing raw fleece is not just about adding soap and water. It is about understanding heat, grease, fiber structure, and patience. With sheep wool, the biggest challenge is lanolin. Lanolin is a stubborn natural fat. It begins to melt around 100 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. But to properly lift it away from the wool, the wash water needs to be much hotter, usually between 140 and 185 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 60 to 85 degrees Celsius. If the greasy water cools before the wool is rinsed, the lanolin can settle back onto the fiber and leave it sticky, gummy, and difficult to work with. That is why many fiber workers use a specialized non-ionic scour, such as Unicorn Power Scour, which helps surround the grease and carry it away without harming the keratin structure of the wool. Alpaca fleece is handled differently because it does not contain lanolin. That means we can usually use gentler heat, around 120 degrees Fahrenheit, along with a mild soap such as baby shampoo. The goal with alpaca is often to remove dust, dirt, and body oils without treating it as if it were greasy sheep wool. But no matter which fiber you are washing, there is one rule you should never ignore. Do not agitate the fiber and avoid thermal shock. Thermal shock happens when wet fiber experiences a sudden temperature change of more than about 20 degrees. If you run water directly onto the fleece, stir it roughly, wring it, or move it suddenly from hot water into cold water, the tiny scales on the fiber can lock together. That is felting. And once it happens, there is no true way to undo it. The right method is simple but disciplined. Gently lower the fiber into the water, let it soak quietly for 15 to 20 minutes, then lift it out with care. No stirring, no twisting, no squeezing it like laundry. This part of the process always reminds me that some things are cleaned best not by force, but by stillness, warmth, and time. Section 4. The art of drying, the spin, the burrito, and the breeze after the final rinse. The water should be the same temperature as the wash water, because those tiny fiber scales do not like sudden changes. At this point, we have clean fiber, but it is heavy, dripping wet, and still very easy to damage. The question is simple. How do we remove the water without wringing, twisting, or rubbing the fiber into felt? This is where centrifugal force becomes very useful. For a small batch, a basic kitchen salad spinner can be one of the most practical tools a homesteader can own. For larger batches, a dedicated spin dryer works even better. The idea is not to squeeze the fleece by force, but to spin the water outward. That way, moisture is pulled away while the fibers are not grinding against each other. Once most of the water is out, I like using what many fiber workers call the burrito method. Spread the damp fleece flat on a clean, dry bath towel, roll it up firmly like a burrito, then gently walk on it. Your body weight presses the remaining moisture into the towel without creating the friction that can damage or felt the fiber. After that, the fleece needs air. Lay it out on raised mesh drying racks so air can move underneath as well as over the top. Good airflow is more important than heat. Never use high heat or a hot hair dryer because too much heat can damage the keratin proteins, take away the natural bounce, and leave the fiber brittle. Let the breeze do the steady work. As with many things on the farm, patience gives the best result. Section 5. Opening the locks, teasing, flicking, and picking. Once the fleece is clean and fully dry, it may look ready, but the locks are often still closed, clumped, and compacted. If we push that fiber straight into the next step, we may end up fighting our tools, tearing the fibers, or creating unnecessary tangles. Before carding or combing, the locks need to be opened. There are several ways to do this, depending on the type and strength of the fleece. For larger, sturdier batches, some fiber workers use a wool picker. It is a powerful tool with sharp metal spikes that pulls the locks apart and turns compacted fiber into a light, open cloud, while also helping leftover dirt and debris fall away. But not every fleece should be treated that aggressively. Fine and delicate fibers, such as merino or alpaca, can be damaged by a heavy picker. If the fiber snaps, those broken pieces may later show up as neps, the tiny stubborn knots that make yarn less smooth and harder to work with. For finer fiber, a gentler method like flicking or teasing is usually the better choice. The process is simple but careful. Take one lock at a time, hold it securely by the cut end against a protective leather patch on your leg. Then gently brush out the tips with a flicker brush or even a clean pet slicker brush. After that, turn the lock around and brush the other end. This step can feel slow, but it teaches you a lot about the quality of your harvest. You touch every lock, feel its strength, notice its softness, and learn where the fiber needs extra care. It is not just preparation. It is the point where you begin to understand the material you are about to turn into yarn. Section 6. The crossroads, carding versus combing. Now, we reach an important decision in the fiber journey. Before spinning, we need to choose what kind of yarn we want to create. Will it be woolen, soft and airy, or worsted, smooth and strong? The answer depends on how we prepare the fiber. If we choose the woolen path, we use carding. Hand carders look like wide paddles covered with fine wire teeth, and they are used to brush the fibers into a light, mixed web. Carding does not line every fiber up perfectly. Instead, it creates a more open, multi-directional arrangement. That little bit of disorder traps a lot of still air inside the fiber. The result is a fluffy rowlag or bat that can be spun into yarn that feels lofty, warm, and lightweight. If we choose the worsted path, we use combing. With combing, the fiber is placed onto rows of long metal tines, then drawn through with another comb. This method is more precise. It removes the short fibers, called noils, and lines the remaining long fibers neatly in the same direction. The prepared fiber is then pulled off into a smooth, continuous ribbon called comb top. Worsted yarn is different from woolen yarn. It is smoother, denser, stronger, and excellent for showing clear stitch definition or delicate lace patterns. Woolen yarn gives warmth through loft and trapped air. Worsted yarn gives strength through order and alignment. That is what makes this stage so interesting. Carding accepts a little chaos and turns it into warmth. Combing creates order and turns it into strength. Both methods are useful. Both can be beautiful. And the right choice depends on the kind of yarn you want in your hands at the end. Section 7. Spinning the magic. From fluff to thread, this is the stage where the real transformation begins, spinning. After all the sorting, washing, drying, and preparing, we finally take loose fiber and turn it into thread. At the simplest level, spinning means adding twist to drafted fiber. That twist gives the fiber strength, structure, and the ability to hold together as yarn. One of the oldest and most beautiful tools for this work is the drop spindle. It may look simple, but it carries thousands of years of human skill in its movement. To begin, we can use the park and draft method, also called the inchworm technique. It comes down to 3 basic actions: pinch, pull, and release. First, the front hand pinches the fiber to stop the twist from traveling too far. Then the back hand gently pulls out a small amount of fiber to the thickness you want. After that, you release the pinch, and the stored twist moves upward into the drafted fiber. In that moment, soft, fragile fluff becomes a stronger, more stable strand of yarn. Alpaca takes a little more care. Because alpaca fiber does not have the same crimp and microscopic grip as sheep wool, it can feel slippery in the hands. If there is not enough twist, the fibers may simply drift apart. To manage alpaca well, you usually need a higher twist density. It can also help to spin from the fold by folding a lock of alpaca over your index finger and drafting from the center, which gives those smooth fibers a better anchor. Spinning demands focus. Pull too hard and the yarn breaks. Add too little twist and it falls apart. Hold too tightly and the fiber refuses to move. Let go too much and you lose control. Like many jobs on the farm, it teaches balance through the hands before the mind even has words for it. Section 8. Setting the twist. The final bloom, once the single threads are spun and often plied together for strength, the yarn still is not truly finished. At this stage, the fiber is holding a lot of stored twist energy. You may notice the yarn wanting to kink, curl, or twist back on itself. That is a sign it needs to be finished properly. This step is called setting the twist. When water and heat are introduced, they temporarily relax the hydrogen bonds inside the wool fiber. As the yarn dries in a calm, relaxed position, those bonds form again, helping lock the twist into place. This gives the yarn more stability and makes it easier to use. To do this, the yarn is wound into a loop called a skein and tied loosely with figure-8 ties so the strands stay organized, but water can still move through. You can soak the skein in lukewarm water for about 20 minutes. If the yarn has clear color lines that you want to protect, steam from a kettle or iron can also be used instead of soaking. Then comes one of the most satisfying parts of the process, mechanical finishing. While the skein is still damp, you can snap it firmly between your hands. Some fiber workers also thwack it by striking the wet skein against a table, bathtub, or clean hard surface. It may sound rough, but this impact helps the fiber open and bloom. That tight, slightly stringy yarn begins to soften, puff up, and settle into itself. What once looked like a narrow, twisted strand becomes fuller, warmer, and more alive in the hand. This final bloom is the moment when the yarn starts to show its true character. Conclusion: from a muddy, grease-filled fleece to a clean, prepared, carefully spun skein of yarn, this entire process shows just how much patience and care natural fiber requires. We have moved through skirting, washing, drying, opening the locks, carding or combing, spinning, and finally setting the twist. Each step has a purpose, and skipping any of them changes the final result. What we create in the end is more than yarn. It is a piece of useful art, shaped by the animal, the land, the weather, and human hands. Every strand carries the story of the pasture, the season, and the work that went into it. Processing raw wool reminds us that real beauty is rarely instant. It takes patience, gentleness, good judgment, and steady effort. The raw and messy things in life can become something warm and valuable when they are handled with care. Thank you for joining me on this journey through raw wool processing from start to finish. If this helped you understand the process, inspired you to try it yourself, or simply gave you a deeper appreciation for sheep, alpacas, and the work behind natural fiber, remember to like, subscribe to Farmyard Care, and share this with someone who loves farm life. Until next time, keep your hands busy, keep your heart open, and keep finding the quiet magic in everyday farm work.